Let's just dive right into this because if there is one food in America practically guaranteed to start a passionate, full-blown debate, it's Chicago deep dish pizza. Some people absolutely revere it as this culinary masterpiece, right? While others, including a certain late-night talk show host, have famously dismissed it as a casserole or even an abomination. But, whether you love it or hate it, the foods of Illinois tell an incredibly fascinating story of immigration, adaptation, and agricultural abundance. So welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to look right past all the controversy and use the history baked directly into our favorite plates to understand the rich, immigrant-driven history of Illinois' foods. Here is our itinerary for today's culinary road trip. We're starting with deep dish origins and myths, then we'll deconstruct the anatomy of Chicago deep dish and explore the cosmopolitan hot dog. After that, we'll head south for Springfield's signature horseshoe sandwich, and finally, wrap things up with some downstate Illinois delicacies. Section 1, Deep Dish Origins and Myths. So, let's start with a surprisingly tough question. Who actually invented the Chicago deep dish pizza? Well, if you ask most people, they're going to point you straight to Pizzeria Uno, founded back in 1943 by Ike Sewell and Rick Ricardo. The widely accepted story is that these two guys came up with the brilliant idea to reverse the layers and bake the pizza in a really deep pan. But wait just a minute, there is a major competing claim here. Some historical accounts suggest that Sewell and Ricardo barely spent any time in the kitchen at all, and that the true culinary mastermind was actually one of their employees, a guy named Adolfo Rudy Malnati Sr. And guys, the drama honestly doesn't stop there. Rudy Sr. had two sons who both vehemently claimed they were handed the authentic recipe, which literally led to the creation of rival pizza empires. That family drama ultimately spawned a legendary pizza family tree. But to really understand it, we have to look back at the 1940s, before all the restaurants. The actual, true catalyst for deep dish was World War II rationing. Italian immigrants needed a way to feed their hungry, hardworking families as cheaply as possible. And since dough ingredients weren't rationed at the time, they realized they could use whatever leftover fillings they had on hand to bake a massive, super-filling meal. From that sheer necessity, Pizzeria Uno was born in 1943. Working at Uno's kind of became this rite of passage. Former employees eventually branched out, helping to start Gino's East in 1966. Then, Rudy Malnati's son Lou opened the famous Lou Malnati's in 1971. A couple of decades later, his half-brother, Rudy Jr., opened Pisano's in 1991. Food critic Jeff Ruby actually summed up this murky, soap opera-level origin story perfectly. He said, "It's an enigma wrapped in a pie crust." We might honestly never know exactly whose hands originally put that dough in the pan, but the massive legacy it created, totally undeniable. Section 2, Anatomy of Chicago Deep Dish. Okay, before we physically dissect the deep dish, we have to bust a major food myth. While deep dish is world famous, it is actually not the everyday pizza for most Chicagoans. I know, shocking, right? Chicago's true hometown favorite is actually tavern-style pizza. Invented around 1946 by Nick Baracco at Vito and Nick's, tavern style is characterized by this amazing, cracker-thin crust. It's cooked in a deck oven, and it's always party cut into little squares. Deep dish, on the flip side, is baked in a heavy cast-iron cake pan, features totally reverse layers, and it is so dense it practically eats like a casserole. So how exactly is a deep dish built? Well, it is entirely backwards compared to a normal pizza. Step 1, you press a unique cornmeal dough high up the sides of a well-oiled cast-iron pan. Step 2, you lay down a thick, heavy bed of cheese directly onto that raw dough. Step 3, in go your meats. Traditionally, the sausage is added totally raw so that as it bakes, all that rich fat seeps down and flavors the crust. Finally, step 4, you cover the whole shebang in a chunky, slightly sweet, and famously raw tomato sauce. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is why they assemble it this way. A deep dish takes about 40 minutes to bake. If the cheese was on top like a normal pizza, it would literally burn to a crisp. So that top layer of tomato sauce acts as a protective heat shield for the cheese bubbling underneath. Now, for this explainer, I really want to focus on the science behind flaky dough, because honestly, this is where the absolute magic of deep dish happens. What makes this dense pie crust so incredible is a scientific process called lamination. Lamination is basically the culinary process of layering butter directly into dough. If you've ever eaten a really good croissant and just marveled at those delicate, shattering, flaky layers, that's lamination. It sounds like something you'd only see a pastry chef doing in a fancy French bakery, but it is the actual secret weapon of the Chicago deep dish. Seriously, let's geek out on the science behind this flaky dough for just a second. To pull this off, bakers take their yeast and cornmeal dough, which already gives it that signature crunch, right? And they spread a layer of softened butter right over it. Then they fold the dough up, locking that fat inside like an envelope, and roll it out again. When this laminated dough hits a blazing hot 425-degree oven, the water trapped inside the butter rapidly turns into steam. This steam literally forces the layers of dough apart, creating these tiny little air pockets. Simultaneously, the fat from the butter is frying the dough from the inside out. Combine all of that action with the olive oil slicked in the cast iron pan, and you get this absolute miracle crust that is somehow thick, structurally sound enough to hold a pound of cheese, yet incredibly flaky and melt in your mouth tender. However, I gotta warn you, that incredible buttery science definitely comes with a cost. $420. That is the calorie count for just one single 149-gram slice of Geno's East deep dish pizza. To put that in perspective, that one slice also packs 22 grams of fat and a massive hit of sodium. Make no mistake, with all that laminated butter, cheese, and sausage, this is a highly decadent fork and knife indulgence. It is absolutely not a health food. Section 3. The Cosmopolitan Hot Dog. Okay, let's shift gears and head over to the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition. Two Austrian-Hungarian Jewish immigrants introduced the original hot dog there. But back then, it was just a simple frankfurter, some mustard, and a pickle. But as Chicago's working-class neighborhoods filled up with diverse immigrant groups, they started adding their own ingredients to create a cheap, incredibly nutritious meal. Let's break down what we now affectionately call a dog dragged through the garden. The mustard and pickle, German and Jewish. The all-beef frankfurter itself is German-Jewish. That iconic poppy seed bun was introduced by Polish immigrants. The bright neon green relish, the tomato, and the onion, those came straight from the Italian and Greek communities. And those spicy little green sport peppers were brought up from the American South. Literally every single bite of this hot dog represents a specific 19th century immigrant community, all coming together on one bun. It's amazing. And the physical places where these hot dogs were sold became vital, beating heart community hubs. By the 1920s, Maxwell Street on Chicago's west side was this incredibly vibrant cultural center where Jewish, Italian, Greek, and Polish vendors all rubbed shoulders. Hot dog stands were the places to bond, to gossip, and to share traditions. Today, though, urban expansion has really altered that landscape. For example, the expansion of the University of Illinois Chicago, or UIC, has displaced historic spots like Jim's Original multiple times, often replacing these vibrant vendor areas with sterile national chains. Yet despite these constantly changing neighborhoods, the Chicago hot dog itself remains this powerful, unifying symbol of the city's cosmopolitan history. Section 4. Springfield's Signature Horseshoe Sandwich. Now, if you thought deep dish was a diet blower, oh man, let me introduce you to the horseshoe. We're leaving the Windy City and heading downstate to Illinois' capital for this one. It is an open-faced sandwich that starts with 2 thick slices of Texas toast, topped with your choice of meat, completely and utterly bury under a heaping pile of crispy French fries, and then finally drenched in a homemade uncurdled cheese sauce. It is traditionally served piping hot on a sizzle platter, and it is just a glorious, completely over-the-top pub staple. The origin story of the horseshoe takes us all the way back to the Roaring '20s. It was created in 1928 at the old Leland Hotel by Chef Joe Schweska and his wife Elizabeth. Joe really needed a fresh new lunch item. He originally used a specific cut of ham that was literally shaped like a horseshoe, which, you guessed it, gave the dish its name. The French fries were scattered on top to represent the horseshoe nails, and that hot metal sizzle platter, that represented the blacksmith's anvil. It's so clever! Chef Joe actually kept his cheese sauce a closely guarded secret for over a decade before finally publishing it in a 1939 newspaper. Section 5. Downstate Illinois Delicacies. Let's wrap up our road trip by uncovering a few more true hidden gems across the state. First up, the cozy dog. I mean, we all know the corn dog, right? Well, Ed Waldmeyer Jr. developed the cozy dog and debuted it at the Illinois State Fair in the 1940s, pretty much cementing battered meat on a stick into fairground history forever. Next, if you ever visit Southern Illinois bakeries, you will find pink cookies. These are incredibly vibrant, super sweet frosted treats that are fiercely defended local delicacies. And finally, popcorn. You probably just associate it with movie theaters, but Illinois takes its popcorn very seriously. Over 300 Illinois farms grow popcorn across 47,000 acres. It was actually designated the official state snack in 2003, and it's heavily celebrated in farming towns like Casey. And speaking of agriculture, we really can't talk about Illinois without mentioning desserts. Get this.
Illinois harvests a staggering 15,900 acres of pumpkins. That is more than twice as many acres as any other state. And because 80% of those pumpkins are destined to become pie filling, pumpkin pie was proudly voted the official state pie. It just proves how massive an impact the Illinois farming landscape has on the classic American dessert table.
Which brings us to our final stop in this explainer. From the buttery, laminated science of a Chicago deep dish crust and the immigrant mapping on a hot dog bun, all the way to the downstate horseshoe and sweeping pumpkin fields, food is just so much more than calories, isn't it? It's history. And this leaves us with a really important question to chew on. As our cities expand, sometimes displacing historic neighborhoods, and as our culinary legends evolve over time, how do we actively preserve the immigrant histories and regional traditions that are baked right into our favorite foods? Next time you sit down for a massive slice, a loaded hot dog, or a towering horseshoe, I really hope you remember the incredible story sitting right there on your plate. Thanks so much for joining me on this culinary road trip.